ASIO boss Mike Burgess, as I mentioned to you, delivered his annual threat assessment to Australia last night. He has set off a political storm that's still gathering pace as we go to air tonight. Reporting of the speech this morning concentrated on his assessment of terrorist threats, as it should, and the possibility of a terror attack. But it was also the revelation that a former politician sold out their country, party and former colleagues to a spy network that ASIO has dubbed the A-Team. Now, Burgess didn't name the accused spy, causing former politicians like Joe Hockey to demand the traitor be outed, named and shamed. Joe Hockey went further and wants retrospective justice dealt out.
If someone has been a traitor, I can't think of a more significant issue when it comes to national security. And of course, he should say immediately who it is, not simply come out of the shadows, say there was a politician and then go back to the shadows and leave everyone else wondering who the hell it was.
He's probably right, but as my colleague Peter Credlin said, it's probably more important what ASIO was saying about the possibility of a sleeper cell in Australia carrying out a terror attack. Joining me now is someone who was in the audience at that address last night by the ASIO boss, Michael Shoebridge from Strategic Analysis Australia. Michael, always good to catch up. You were there at that speech last night. Do you agree with Peter that the threat of a terror attack is what we should be concentrating on?
Well, I think Peter is right, but we've got to be able to walk and chew gum. So I would love to see this traitor to our country prosecuted. That can happen, that should happen, but I think we're right not to overlook the other point that Mike Burgess made, that Sunni terrorism is the most threatening source of an attack here in Australia. And I think he's right about that.
When I heard him make that warning, Michael, it struck me, and it wouldn't have struck you the same way because you're immersed in this stuff all the time. It struck me that average Australians haven't talked about, worried about and feared a terrorist attack now for a very long time.
Yes, and in fact, ASIO lowered the terrorist threat level just a little while ago. Well, I think it's time to put it back up again based on what Mike Burgess told us. Before he spoke, he showed a short film about the Ukraine war, about the war in the Middle East, but also about some very violent, angry protests in Australia and other parts of the world. And that anger we see in our community is a source of opportunity for Sunni terrorist groups. Don't forget Hamas is a Sunni terrorist group, and so is Islamic State. They're not dead yet. They killed a whole bunch of people in Iran. When you see that anger on Australian streets, that is the land of opportunity for these terrorists.
So when the ASIO boss talks about the A-Team spy revelations, revealing that a former politician had been compromised, he hasn't named the politician, and he in fact hasn't named the source of the A-Team, where they came from. What's your suspicion of where they might have originated from?
Well, when you look at the numbers and scale of foreign intelligence agencies that have an intent to target Australia, the two big ones are Russia and China, but China is far bigger and more dangerous as an intelligence community than Russia, and China has form. The reason we had to strengthen our laws back in 2018 was because of China's intelligence intrusions into Australia to corrupt our political system. So my bet is on China, and that's just driven by the numbers and track record.
Well, that's absolutely right. And you and I have spoken before, and you've told me before about the amount of activity by Chinese residents in Australia working back to the Communist Party in China and the things that they are potentially getting up to. I mean, they are very active, aren't they?
Yes, but what we were told last night is ASIO has done fantastic work to identify that spy ring and identify the fact that they had successfully cultivated an Australian politician who was then doing their bidding in return for money and benefits and betraying their country. There's a whole body of evidence there that should be the start of a criminal prosecution. Now, it's not Mike Burgess's job to do prosecutions or decide whether there should be one. The Attorney General needs to drive a formal criminal prosecution of this former politician.
That would be retrospective, a retrospective investigation. I don't quite understand why, if they identified this A group, as they called them, and then they identified the contact with the politician, would ASIO not have gone to the AFP or the AG or someone in government and said, listen, this is what this bloke's been up to. I think you better investigate him and charge him? I don't understand that.
Well, they went... They told the spy ring that was doing it that they'd been discovered and found out. So they told the foreign spy agency. They also went to the politician and said, this is a bad thing, you need to stop. And apparently the person did. But how is it possibly left there? ASIO has gathered this phenomenal body of information that lets Mike Burgess tell us what he told us last night. Espionage has been a crime in Australia since 1914. And this is inside the statute of limitations. There should be a criminal prosecution.
Yeah, it's beggars belief, really. I mean, you know, I go and work as a traitor. I take some sort of payment, presumably, or, you know, are given assets in a company or whatever. I betray my country. I betray my colleagues in politics. I betray everybody I've ever dealt with. And I say, OK, you caught me, but I'm going to stop now.
So we leave this politician who, to use Mike Burgess's words, has sold out his country to enjoy the fruits of selling out the country and to just sit there fat, dumb and happy and live their life. Meanwhile, every politician is now a suspect and they're all busily trying to say it wasn't me. If we want to corrode trust in our politicians, not prosecuting this person is the best way to do that. We need to build trust in our political system, not degrade it.
Yeah, magnificently said, Michael Shoebridge. It was a pleasure to catch up with you. Thank you very much. That's Michael Shoebridge there.